Today we're going to check out A Complete Unknown on 4K UHD. I'm not here to talk about how good or bad the movie is, I'm just going to share some thoughts on the audio and video quality. Now let's go over a few tech specs. This movie was captured in 8.6 and 4K. It's got a 4K DI. It's an R-rated film running a substantial 141 minutes, presented in a 2.39:1 aspect ratio, and features a Dolby Atmos audio track. Before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the Atmos mix and see how active those height channels are, if you're not familiar with the Atmos viewer, I've put a link down below in this video's description which will give you a full breakdown of what it is, how it works, and where to get it. Plus, you'll find a complete list of all my testing equipment down there as well, so you'll know exactly what I'm working with. So being a movie with music being a big focus, I was expecting this to have a knockout Atmos mix. But for the majority of the time, it's essentially just a 7-channel mix. Not that it needed to always have the top channels being active, since it's mostly a drama with a lot of dialogue, but coming from just watching Conclave, which has a great Atmos mix with popes walking around the Vatican, this movie comes up short from an Atmos perspective. So looking at the Atmos viewer, we can see that during a lot of the musical scenes, all of the audio is coming from the lower channels. However, it does capture the space where the music sessions take place. So whether it's a small bar or concert hall, the soundstage changes in size appropriately. I'm sure if they added in the top channels for some added depth, the scale of those musical venues would have been much more realistic. Now there is a spattering of brief 30-second or so scenes which do activate the top channels. At 41 minutes, you can hear the rain outside, creating a convincing sense of being indoors. At 1 hour, 11 minutes, Timmy's motorcycle ride is accompanied by overhead atmospherics. And at 1 hour, 32 minutes, the concert scene utilizes the height channels for musical extension. And there are also a few fleeting 5-second shots that don't really add all that much. The final third of the film sees most of the overhead activity, with subtle height channel usage at the Newport Festival adding a sense of space to the outdoor setting. It's not a dramatic effect, but it's a welcome change after the predominantly ear-level musical sequences. As for bass response, I think the Johnny Cash bit had the most impactful subwoofer usage, and there is a part where Paul gets out of the taxi which has some oddly deep bass. There's some okay response during the concert footage, but nothing that's going to push your subwoofers. Now, I did do some research and listen to some of Bob Dylan's music after I watched this movie, and it doesn't have a ton of bass to begin with, so the LFE usage did feel appropriate. And of course, dialogue and vocals remained crystal clear throughout. Thanks to Kaleidescape for providing me with this copy of A Complete Unknown on 4K so I can bring you, the home theater movie loving community, this 4K review. Now, if you want to get your movies weeks and sometimes months before they come out on 4K Blu-ray in the same if not better quality, consider getting a Kaleidescape at our channel partner Dream Media. Links are down in the video's description. As for video quality, this had a similar process to what was done on Dune and Dune 2. It was shot digitally, and then they used the process which they called Shift AI. It's not artificial intelligence, it stands for analog intermediate. So they took the digital footage, did all the color correction, and did whatever else they needed to do, scanned it to Kodak film to capture all of the natural film grain, and then scanned it back to digital. So you have a digitally shot movie with the look of natural film grain. And if you are a grain hater, you probably won't like the way this movie looks because it does have a good amount of grain throughout. With that said, it's got some great detail. It's not 4K crispy detail, but it's there under all that grain. There's still detail in the close-up shots, so you can make out all the blemishes and strands of hair, and the costumes looked great with really nice textures. Now, I did have to Google one thing because I wasn't sure if Timmy had really bad hygiene or what, but apparently the real Bob Dylan had some wickedly long fingernails back in the day. So not only did Chalamet learn to play the guitar and the harmonica, he also grew out some wicked dirty claws. And the 4K resolution definitely captured all the grime in those close-up shots. Not even the film grain could obscure that. As for the HDR, it's got a bright, very high contrast, heavily saturated look. It's got a mixture of darker, muted tones with some excellent splashes of color for those outdoor scenes with greens and blues for those festival shots. It's a bit on the warmer side, and they were trying to capture that 60s vintage look by going with the film grain and this specific color palette. And since this movie is heavy on contrast, the black levels are extremely deep, bordering on crushing detail, but not quite. And the highlight detail is bordering on clipping detail, but not quite. So you get these black and white extremes that elevate the image depth. If you've got a really high-nit display or a really bright TV, this movie's gonna pop. And if you don't have a hatred for film grain, I think you're gonna be really impressed with the way this movie looks. I'm gonna go with a 9.3 for video. For audio, if I was to rate this on being just a 7-channel mix, I'd have to put this in the high 8s because the music sounded great and Modib put on a great Dylan performance. But this is advertised as having an Atmos mix. Using the high channels during the musical performances really should have been a thing and would have no doubt elevated the experience. So if Lisan Al Gaib loses the Oscar this year, I blame the lack of a fully active Atmos mix. I'm gonna go with a 7 for audio. Now this review was based on the Kaleidescape movie download, which comes in at 86.1 gigs in Dolby Vision. If you're holding out on picking this up on 4K Blu-ray, that'll be available on April 1st, which is a few weeks away, or you can grab it now in the Kaleidescape in the same, if not better quality. The audio will be exactly the same. So what are your thoughts on A Complete Unknown in 4K? Have you seen it, and what'd you think about the 4K transfer? Also, what'd you think about the movie? Did you like it? I thought it was pretty good. Leave a comment down below and let me know. Now, if you do want to pick up this movie, I will leave some links for it down below in this video's description. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you want, you can follow us on social media, and if you want to support the channel and get exclusive content or great discounts on audio and video gear, then stop by our Patreon page. Be sure to like this video if you found it useful and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you again in the next video.